And now, friends, on this holy day, let us gather in peace and unity, as one before the grace and grandeur of life, as children before its great and loving mystery. In this hour, may we know anew the holy joy of human lives growing together, so that this hour will imbue all those to come with that same gift. Come, let us worship together.
We gather this morning in celebration of life. Life like flowing water, derived from the depths, a hidden source. Sometimes rushing in like a mighty current, flooding our hearts. Sometimes quiet and calming, a soft, babbling brook. We gather to celebrate life in all its richness, the crash of the ocean waves, the peace of the river, this ebb and flow on the shores of our souls. And this lighting of the chalice, let us honor the richness of the life and the lives we hold dear.
Somehow, it doesn't seem to matter how many years I've been on this earth, how many revolutions I've made around the sun. There's still a sense of excitement that awakens inside of me at the start of summer. No matter how long ago I left the school year behind and joined the working world, summer has always represented a time of slowing down and renewal. This year, I found myself facing the summer with that familiar feeling of excitement and relief, tempered by the sense of anxiety that had taken hold during the 2+ years of the pandemic. On the one hand, I was ready to get out of the house, to shed my routine, to shed some of my responsibilities, and to enjoy being somewhere new. But on the other hand, just under the surface were the gnawing, persistent questions. Would I be safe? And what level of risk was I willing to take? Unwilling to sustain our isolation any longer, Devin and I made our summer plans. Our choices reflected a balance of our need to get out and reconnect with family and friends while retaining a sense of safety. The result was a number of excursions, both near and far, that involved the outdoors and water. Both have played a significant role in my upbringing and bring me comfort and renew my spirit. We began the summer by traveling to North Carolina to visit Devin's oldest son. When there, the summer heat was just setting in. We spent a day at a quarry seeking relief from the heat. And there we bobbed and swam in the deep, clear, cool waters while we visited. Upon returning home, we spent the next 2 weekends in Toms River, where Devin's mother has a home. The water was still cool, but just beginning to warm. We spent time running along the river's edge, on the beach, exploring on paddleboards, kayaking, and swimming. Next was a trip to Shepherdstown and Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. Nestled on and between the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers. While there, in the quiet of the early morning hours, I ran along the banks of the rivers, reminiscing on canoe trips from the past years, drinking in the history, and welcoming the wildlife. Again, upon returning home, Devin and I turned around just a few days later and set out for Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where I'd spent many years while growing up during summers. Staying with friends, we enjoyed early morning runs along the boardwalk, time on the beach, and backyard dinners. Back home, one more time, 2 more weekends spent in Toms River, followed by our biggest trip of the summer to Bar Harbor, Maine. On the way, we stopped in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and while there, again, runs and walks, we explored the town and riverfront, soaking in history, watching the ships come and go. And finally, we arrived in Bar Harbor, crossing over the Mount Desert Narrows onto Mount Desert Island. We were welcomed by the beauty of the place. Clear blue bays dotted with mountainous islands. It was just stunning. Though there were throngs of people busing across the island throughout the day, there was a sense of serenity and openness. Surrounded by water on all sides, there was a sense of freedom to the place. While there, we visited homes and gardens across the island, explored inlets, and walked along coastal trails. Following this last adventure, we returned home. And still today, visits to Toms River continue. I'm drawn to the water as I run along the banks of the river and to the bay, through towns and marinas. We sit on the small beach and enjoy watching the birds, boats, and paddleboards. So in reality, the waters I witnessed and enjoyed on each of these places are all connected. This morning, as I return to my spiritual home, I bring water that represents all of these adventures. It represents my travels to places stretched up and down the eastern seaboard. It represents my love for the body of waters surrounding them. It represents the memories of the times I spent on those bodies of water in the years past and the memories I continue to make today. It represents the comforts of returning to the now familiar water in the place I call home. And it represents the renewal of my spirit. I am so happy to be back, and I am renewed and ready to take on a new year. Thank you.
We begin with a reading. This is the poem Ode to Drinking Water from My Hands by Ross Gay. Ode to drinking water from my hands, which today in the garden I'd forgotten, I'd known and more forgotten. I'd learned and was taught this by my grandfather, who in the midst of arranging and watering the small bouquets on mostly the freshest graves, saw my thirst and cranked the rusty red pump, bringing forth from what sounded like the gravelly throat of an animal a frigid torrent, and with his hands made a lagoon from which he drank, and then I drank, before he cranked again, making of my hands now a fountain, in which I can see the silty bottom drifting while I drink and drink. And my grandfather waters the flowers on the graves, among which are his and his wife's, unfinished and patient, glistening after he rinses the refuse from his wife's, and the pump exhales, and I drink to the bottom of my fountain and join him in his work. There ends the reading. I was at a dinner once, the sort of dinner that follows a day's worth of meetings with another day or two more to come. We were tired and ready to retreat back to our hotel rooms and relax, or go out in small groups and relax, or just in some way relax after a day of difficult discussions and repeatedly trying to collectively choose the better of a few bad options. We were meant to grow together during the meal, both for its own blessing and to be better as a group the next day and throughout our work. But we were more siloed at that table, more alone than together, more quiet than chatty, and the chatty that was there felt forced, polite. It was then that a busser carrying an impossibly large tray of glasses of water to a large table near us, tripped over a purse that had fallen from the chair back of its owner, and the busser's water went flying down the back of the person next to me, sprinkled or streaming on many of the rest of us, all over the busser, who valiantly tried to keep the spill on him, and the owner of the purse got the worst of it. She was soaked. We were awakened from our ennui, to be sure. That really livened things up. The busser was mortified. The purse owner was too. The rest of us smiled and laughed, eager to convince them that all was well. I think grateful for the spark, the shower, the surprise in a way. We assured the busser that water dries clean, joked that at least it wasn't wine, sort of wished maybe it had been some wine. And as the purse owner and her party made sure the busser and we were okay, we knew we were, for we had been showered with life, made alert, and become grateful for the meal, for one another, and for laughter. Ross Gay says in his poem that his grandfather saw his thirst and met it, with silty pump water cradled in his earthy, aging hands. And while I know the busser didn't spill anything on us, perhaps he too saw our thirst. I'm sure others did. And something about the accidental grace of that fall met it with water and life. It took the edges off a tired and guarded group. It brought us closer together, more so than the food, the work, and even the passion that had us there to begin with. It was an accident that opened us to one another, that softened the hardened edges of our hearts, as water does with rock, Water, stronger, more powerful than the rock, that through time and flow can wear rock down into something silty, sandy, soft. The mountains we watch, we climb, at which we marvel, met with water for long enough, become the sand upon which we walk, and with which we build castles and forts, and upon which turtles who could never climb a mountain make their way to the sea. We, for whom some mountains in life are impossible to surmount, can nonetheless walk on them as holy ground once water has turned them to sand. It's like this with our hearts too. Tears of sadness, of joy, of laughter, and sympathy soften our hardened hearts. They smooth the edges of who we are. We are malleable before them as we laugh and cry our ways into better beings. Though the world demands anger and othering, seeks our playing into polarization and the dehumanization of group after group after group, we know that water is most of who all of us are, that we share in our tears the joys and sorrows of lives forever and always more one than separate. No matter how different we seem, we are in the end more alike than unalike, as the great Maya Angelou wrote. And while profit and power demand our allegiance to smallness and bitterness, our hearts crave the softening that comes from flowing with larger life, from seeing ourselves not as separate from creation and one another, but as part of it, from being open and receptive to neighbor and stranger, from drinking with one another the clear, silty water once cupped in the hands of our ancestors, cupped by us for those to come. Ross Gay's grandfather saw his thirst, the most moving line in that poem to me. We need to see our own and our neighbors, and we need to, together, cup our hands and drink. Which we did that evening at the dinner after things had been livened up by the accidental grace of that spilled tray. We toasted one another a little while after that, not with wine, though some had that, not with coffee or tea or soda, though some had those, but with water. Fresh, clear, clean water that we could all drink, that we all had to drink, that was our great biological commonality that night and our spiritual and collective sustenance. In our homes right now, or wherever you're watching this, you have water with you. Take a moment to look at it, to move it around, to see the motion and the light. Notice its beauty and take a moment to be grateful for its gifts. What does it remind you of? Where is it from? And if it's clean, take a sip and taste. And think of those whose hands have cupped water for you, or if not water, have held you in times of sadness, embraced you in times of joy, celebrated and mourned with you. Whose hands have cupped yours when you needed connection? Whose have soothed your young brows when sick? And know that these unite us, that we are one in the spirit of care, and that all live in this spirit of care for life, for all are loved and all love. And know that as water in your container merges in spirit with water from others in our congregation, we strengthen so that it flows more greatly, this caring, this message, this gospel of faith that we offer to the world, that we are one in love and in life. Though we are diverse and different in ways both inspiring and challenging, rain falls on all of us. Water quenches every thirst, and our bodies, our tears, and our lives merging and growing together are more water than anything else. May it soften our hearts. May it nourish us in love. And may it lead us to one another again and again. For our benediction, go forth grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the people among you, and the Spirit guiding you toward lives of greater love and beauty and kindness. And go forth knowing that you are held always, and always with neighbor and stranger, by that great love of no beginning and never ending. Go in peace, and amen.